George never thought his world would end on a quiet autumn morning. Leaves burned orange and gold outside his college dorm window. His best friend Liam was laughing as usual, tossing a football in the air while teasing him about his girlfriend Clara, who was waiting downstairs for their morning walk. Everything felt so ordinary, too ordinary. Then the siren started. A deep, trembling roar rolled through the city, followed by an emergency alert that crackled across every phone. Containment breach, unknown infection, seek shelter immediately. George looked outside. People were running, screaming. A man collapsed on the street, his body convulsing as his eyes turned white. Liam froze. Dude, is this a joke? It was. George grabbed Clara's hand, heart pounding. The world was crumbling in real time. Cars crashed, flames burst from buildings, and chaos swallowed the horizon. And as they fled through the crimson haze, George whispered to Clara, "No matter what happens, I'll protect you." The city was burning, and the end of the world had just begun. The three of them, George, Clara, and Liam, stumbled into an abandoned subway tunnel, gasping for air as the world above screamed and burned. The flicker of George's flashlight painted cracked tiles and graffiti across the walls. For 2 days, they stayed hidden there, surviving on vending machine snacks and bottled water. The tunnels echoed with distant moans, the infected wandering above. Clara shivered, leaning against George. He wrapped his arm around her, whispering, "We'll make it out, we just need a plan." But Liam was changing. His eyes were dark, restless. He watched George and Clara too closely. When George spoke about finding other survivors, Liam snapped. "You think you can save everyone, huh? You're always the hero." George frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Liam muttered, but his voice cracked with something dangerous. Jealousy. That night as George slept, Clara shook him awake. Her voice trembled. "George, Liam's gone." George grabbed his flashlight. They found Liam near the tunnel exit, talking to strangers, armed strangers, promising them supplies, and giving away their location. When George confronted him, Liam smirked. "I did what I had to. There's no friendship in the apocalypse." The men turned their guns. Shots rang out. Clara screamed. George pulled her behind a concrete pillar, his heart racing, blood in his ear, betrayal burning like fire. He realized then, the world wasn't just ending. It was revealing who people truly were. Gunfire echoed through the underground like thunder. George ducked low, dragging Clara with him behind the rusted remains of an old subway car. The flicker of the flashlight caught the red smear on the floor. Someone had already fallen. Liam's voice shouted from the darkness, "George, don't make this harder than it has to be." George's pulse hammered in his chest. "The man I called brother just sold us out." The raiders advanced, boots clanging on the metal tracks. George spotted a fire extinguisher, grabbed it, and hurled it at the light source. Glass shattered, plunging the tunnel into blackness. A shot grazed his shoulder, searing hot pain slicing through him. Clara gasped, pressing her scarf against the wound. "George, we have to run." They sprinted down the dark rails. The air was thick with dust, echoes, and the distant groans of the infected. Behind them, Liam yelled, "You'll regret this, I kept you alive." But George didn't stop. He and Clara burst into an old maintenance shaft, slamming the gate shut. They leaned against the cold wall, breathing hard, hearts breaking. Clara whispered, tears streaking her dirty cheeks, "He was your best friend." George looked away, eyes filled with fire. "He was, now he's just another enemy." The sound of rain began to echo above ground. A storm had rolled in, washing the world in cold, gray sorrow. George stared at the ladder leading up. "Let's go," he said quietly. "The surface might be worse, but staying here will kill us." Together they climbed toward the rain, toward whatever hell awaited next. The metal hatch creaked open, and cold rain poured down like shattered glass. George and Clara emerged onto the ruined streets of the city, the once bustling skyline now drowned in smoke and fire. Autumn leaves, soaked in crimson rain, stuck to their boots as they moved carefully through the wreckage. Cars were overturned. Bodies lay motionless, some human, some not anymore. The infected wandered aimlessly in the downpour, their movements slow but hungry. George whispered, "Stay close, don't make a sound." They ducked behind an old food truck. Through the haze, Clara spotted a convenience store still standing. There may be supplies. George nodded. They slipped inside. The store was half destroyed, shelves overturned. But they found what mattered: a flashlight, water, canned food, and a half-working radio. Static buzzed, then a voice broke through. "Anyone alive, head north to Ridgeview. There's a survivor camp. Repeat, Ridgeview camp." Clara's eyes widened. A safe place. George clenched his fist. If it's real, that's where we're going. But as he turned toward the broken window, a shadow moved outside. Liam, soaked, bleeding, but alive. He was watching them, silently through the rain. Then he smiled, a cruel, hollow smile. "You're still breathing. Guess I didn't finish the job." George froze. The world seemed to go still except for the rain hitting the glass. Before he could react, Liam raised his pistol and fired. The gunshot shattered the store's front glass, but the bullet missed. It whizzed past George's ear, embedding into a shelf of canned beans. Clara screamed. George grabbed her hand and dove behind the counter. Rain poured through the broken window as Liam stepped inside, his eyes wild, gun trembling in his grip. "You left me to die," he roared. "You betrayed us," George shot back. For a heartbeat, the two locked eyes, best friends turned enemies, soaked in guilt and fury. Liam hesitated, his lip quivered. "You don't understand. They would have killed me if I didn't give you up." George's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "You already did." The infected, drawn by the noise, started gathering outside. Their silhouettes swayed against the stormlight, dozens of them. George saw the terror flicker in Liam's eyes. "We can still make it," George said sharply. "Help us and we'll all get out alive." Liam lowered the gun, his hands shook. "I can't." The door burst open. A corpse-like figure lunged in, jaws snapping. Liam turned, fired twice, but 3 more came through. "Run!" George yelled, grabbing Clara and sprinting toward the back exit. He looked back once, Liam, cornered, screaming as the horde fell upon him. The sound of it would haunt George forever. Outside, George and Clara ran into the storm until their lungs burned. They found shelter under a collapsed bridge. Clara clung to him, trembling. "You tried to save him." "I had to," George said quietly. "Even after everything, he was my brother once." Thunder rumbled overhead, and the city groaned beneath the weight of its own dead. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the world wrapped in mist and silence. George and Clara emerged from beneath the collapsed bridge, exhausted but alive. The golden hue of autumn sunlight broke through the clouds, soft, haunting, and beautiful against the devastation. They walked north, following cracked highways covered in vines and abandoned cars. Every few miles, George marked a signpost with a red X, a silent message to any survivors who might follow. Clara's hand found his. "You think Ridgeview is real?" George looked at the horizon. "It has to be. Hope's all we've got left." By afternoon, they reached the outskirts of a forest, the trees swaying with dying amber leaves. A faded sign read, "RIDGVAW 12 MILES." They stopped to rest near an old cabin. Inside, they found dusty blankets, a lantern, and, to George's disbelief, an old photograph of a family smiling. For a moment, the world felt almost human again. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. What if this is what it takes, losing everything to realize what matters? He looked at her, eyes soft. "Then I guess we start over together." But that fragile piece shattered with a rustling sound outside. George motioned for silence, pulling out a rusted crowbar. He stepped out, scanning the tree line. A silhouette moved, too fast for an infected, too quiet for a survivor. Then, from the mist, a figure emerged wearing military armor and a gas mask. The stranger raised a hand. "Don't shoot, I'm with Ridgeview." George froze, torn between trust and fear. Was salvation finally within reach, or just another trap? George tightened his grip on the crowbar. "Take off the mask, slowly." The soldier hesitated, then lifted it. Underneath was a young woman, short brown hair matted with rain, eyes sharp but weary. "Name, Sergeant Myra Kane," she said quietly. "Ridgeview sent me to scout for survivors. You two are the first I've found in weeks." Clara stepped forward, hope lighting her eyes. "You mean Ridgeview is real?" Myra nodded. "A fortified community in the mountains. We have power, farms, doctors, but it's not easy to get there, the valley, crawling with infected." George's instincts buzzed with caution. "Why are you alone?" Myra's gaze fell to the ground. My unit didn't make it." Silence hung heavy in the cold air. Still, George saw the determination in her. She wasn't lying, or if she was, she believed her own words. "All right," George said finally, "we're coming with you." Myra gave a small nod. "Then stay close. Ridgeview's 12 miles through that forest, and not everyone who enters makes it out." They moved as a group, the forest a maze of dying leaves and bones. The autumn wind howled through broken branches. At dusk they reached a clearing, a collapsed military truck half buried in dirt. Myra froze, eyes wide. "This was my checkpoint." George noticed something glinting in the mud: dog tags, torn clothing, blood long dried. Before he could speak, a low groan echoed through the trees, then another. Shapes emerged, dozens of infected, moving fast. Myra cursed, raising her rifle. "We're surrounded." George pulled Clara close. "We fight, we run, we survive." The forest erupted in chaos, gunfire, screams, and the smell of burning leaves. And through it all, George saw it again, the same fire in Clara's eyes that kept him going since the first day. Love, fragile but fierce, burning against the end of the world. The forest ignited in chaos. Gunfire cracked through the cold autumn air, echoing across the trees like thunder. Myra fired short bursts, dropping the first wave of infected, but there were too many, their guttural cries merging with the snapping of branches. George swung his crowbar with everything he had, the weight of survival driving every blow. Blood sprayed across the leaves, turning them from gold to red. Clara fought beside him with a kitchen knife she refused to let go of since day one. "Keep moving," Myra shouted. "We can't stay here." They pushed deeper into the forest, the glow of burning trees chasing them. Smoke and sparks danced through the mist, the world around them a living nightmare of fire and ash. A branch cracked under George's foot. He stumbled, nearly falling into a ditch. Clara caught him, her hands trembling. "You okay?" He nodded, panting. "Yeah, go." They reached a stream, the reflection of flames rippling on its surface. Myra tossed a flare downstream. The bright red light drifted away, drawing some of the horde with it. "That'll buy us time," she said, reloading. But when George looked back, his breath caught. Through the smoke, a figure was following them, staggering, limping, familiar. Liam. Or what was left of him. His skin was pale, his eyes white, his movements jerky. But his voice, that same broken, angry tone, rasped out. "You left me." Clara gasped, tears pooling in her eyes. George froze, heart twisting between grief and horror. "George," Myra said sharply, "we have to move, now." He turned away, choking down the pain. "Goodbye, Liam," he whispered, and with one clean strike ended it. The forest fell silent, except for the crackle of distant fire. George dropped the crowbar, shaking. Clara wrapped her arms around him, her voice breaking. He was already gone, George. You just set him free. The sun was setting now, painting the smoke-stained sky in red and gold. Myra pointed ahead, her tone low but steady. Ridgeview's 2 days from here. If we move fast, we can make it before the next storm. George looked at Clara, then at the horizon. Then we don't stop until we're home. The next morning, the fire was just a memory, blackened trees, ash underfoot, and a pale gray sky that smelled of smoke and rain. George, Clara, and Myra followed a cracked road cutting through the woods, once a highway, now a graveyard of cars and memories. Rusting vehicles lined both sides, doors hanging open, belongings scattered like ghosts of the old world. A child's teddy bear lay in the middle of the lane, soaked from the night's dew. Clara stopped to pick it up, brushing away the ash. "Someone must have dropped it while running," she whispered. "Leave it," Myra said softly. "We can't carry the past anymore." But Clara tucked it into her backpack anyway. George saw that, and for the first time in days, he smiled faintly. They walked in silence until noon. The forest gave way to empty plains, and the cold wind picked up, whistling through broken road signs. Then they heard it, a faint hum. Engines. They ducked behind an overturned truck, just in time to see a convoy of black vehicles rolling down the road, armored, with mounted guns. Myra's face hardened. "Not Ridgeview, those are hunters." George frowned. "Hunters. Rogue soldiers. They raid survivor camps, steal supplies, and kill anyone who won't kneel." The convoy stopped near a small diner up ahead. Men in tattered gear poured out, dragging someone from the back of a truck. Clara covered her mouth. "They're still alive." Myra cursed under her breath. "We can't help them. If they spot us, it's over." George's jaw clenched. He could hear the screams. He looked at Clara. Her eyes were begging him to walk away, but he couldn't. Not again. Not after Liam. "I won't leave them," George said, gripping his crowbar. "If we lose who we are, then the world's already won." Myra stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You're going to get us killed, hero. Fine. We go quiet fast and pray the wind on our side." They crawled closer through the wrecks, the smell of gasoline thick in the air. The sun dipped low, painting the world in dying orange light, the calm before another storm. And as George raised his weapon, the reflection of the burning horizon glinted in his eyes. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting to deserve the life he still had. The dying sun bathed the world in molten gold. Every car, every shard of glass on the highway reflected its fire, a cinematic glow that made the moment feel suspended between hope and death. George crouched behind the diner's wrecked sign, heart hammering. Inside, the hunters laughed and shouted. He could see their prisoners, 3 people tied to chairs, faces bruised and terrified. Myra adjusted her rifle's scope. 5 targets, maybe 6 inside. George nodded. "We take them fast before they can radio." Clara's hands trembled around her knife. "George, what if you don't come back?" He looked into her eyes, those soft, brown eyes that still held warmth in a dying world. "Then you keep running. You live, Clara, promise me." She shook her head, tears welling up. "Not without you." Myra exhaled, annoyed but impressed. "You 2 done writing a love letter. Let's move." They slipped through the shadows. Myra shot out the generator's light. The diner plunged into darkness. The hunters cursed, confused. George moved like a ghost, crowbar in hand, taking down one near the door. Another turned, raising his weapon. Myra's silenced shot dropped him before he could speak. Then chaos broke loose. Gunfire erupted. George tackled one man through a table. Clara cut the ropes on the captives as bullets shattered the windows. A flare burst outside, red light flooding the room. Myra yelled. They called for backup. George looked at the prisoners. "Can you run?" A woman nodded weakly. Yes, thank you. They all sprinted through the shattered back wall into the open fields as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, the last glow fading behind them. Explosions rippled down the highway. Smoke rose against the darkening sky. When they finally stopped running, Clara collapsed into George's arms, sobbing in relief. Myra stood watch, face unreadable. You're insane, you know that. George smiled faintly. Maybe, but we saved them. She holstered her rifle. Ridgeview gunna like you. The rescued woman, pale, shivering, looked up. You're going to Ridgeview. Then you should know it's not what it used to be. George frowned. What do you mean? Her eyes flickered with fear. Ridgeview fell 2 weeks ago. The wind howled through the fields. Myra's expression went blank. That's impossible. But deep down, George knew in this world, nothing good lasted forever. George, Clara, Myra, and the rescued survivors trudged through the cold night, the air thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burned buildings. Ahead, the mountains, once promised as salvation, now loomed like tombstones in the dark. When they reached Ridgeview's gates the next morning, the sight stole their breath. Walls were shattered, guard towers toppled, fires still burned in patches. Scavengers and infected mingled among the ruins. The survivor camp they had dreamed of was gone. Clara clung to George. We can't stop now, can we? George shook his head. No, we survived this far, we keep moving. Myra scanned the ruins. It looks like the attack was coordinated. Hunters, infected, maybe even traitors. Ridgeview never stood a chance. She looked at George, voice quiet. There are rumors of another survivor stronghold further east called Destiny. Hard to find, harder to get to. George's jaw tightened. Then that's where we go, whatever it takes. As they scavenged for supplies, a noise made them freeze, a soft groan from a collapsed building. George approached carefully. Clara followed, knife at the ready. Under the rubble, a small boy stared at them with wide, frightened eyes. I'm alone, he whispered. Please don't leave me. George hesitated, remembering Liam, remembering all the people he couldn't save. You're coming with us, he said firmly. The boy's small hand found Clara, and she nodded at George, tears brimming. We're not leaving anyone behind, she said. And so, with 3 survivors added to their group, they set off east toward the unknown. The road ahead was littered with dangers, storms, infected, and the ever-present threat of betrayal, but hope, fragile and stubborn, burned in their hearts. As the sun set, the mountains glowed in the distance like a promise. Destiny awaits. The valley stretched before them like a dark wound in the earth. A thick fog clung to the ground, hiding jagged rocks, twisted trees, and the occasional corpse of those who had failed to survive. Every step George took echoed loudly, threatening to give away their position. Myra led the group, scanning the fog with her rifle. Quiet, one false move and the valley eats you. Clara shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. It feels alive. George glanced at her. It's just fear talking. Stay close. We move together always. The boy, holding Clara's hand, whimpered at the shadows. George knelt beside him. Hey, you're safe, I promise. No one's taking you from us. They pressed forward, each step a battle against the cold, the fear, and the unknown. Suddenly, the fog parted just enough to reveal a cluster of infected, dozens, maybe more, moving silently. Myra hissed, dead ahead, we can't fight them all. George looked around, rocks, fallen logs, the ruins of an old bridge. He took a deep breath. We sneak, one step at a time, follow my lead. They inched forward, hearts hammering, breath visible in the cold air. Every snapping twig was a threat, every shadow a predator. One misstep, George felt it underfoot. A loose plank shifted, making a noise like a gunshot. The infected froze. Their heads turned, slow, deliberate, hungry eyes locking onto them. George grabbed Clara's hand. Run. They bolted through the valley, leaping over rocks and fallen debris, the fog swirling around them like a living tide. Myra fired a few shots to distract, giving them precious seconds. The boy screamed as one reached for him, but George yanked him forward, barely dodging the grasping hands. At last they burst from the valley's edge, lungs burning, hearts pounding. They collapsed on the other side, shaking, bloodied but alive. George looked back at the valley, shadows swallowing everything they had just escaped. "We made it," he whispered, "but nothing's over yet." Clara leaned against him, shivering but smiling faintly. "We have each other, and that's enough, isn't it?" George tightened his arm around her. "It's more than enough." The mountains loomed closer now, their peaks hidden in heavy gray clouds. George, Clara, Myra, and the boy climbed the rocky paths, their legs screaming in protest. The wind cut through them, cold and relentless, carrying whispers of rain and distant thunder. "Destiny should be just over the ridge," Myra said, her voice strained. "If we can survive this storm, we might finally make it." Clouds rolled in fast, and soon the first drops of icy rain began to fall. Clara pulled her jacket tighter, shivering. "We'll never make it if this keeps up." George looked at her, determination burning in his eyes. "We will, we have to." As they ascended, lightning split the sky, illuminating the jagged cliffs. The boy clung to George's hand, terrified. "I'm scared," he whispered. George knelt, looking him in the eyes. "It's okay to be scared. That's why we stick together. You're safe as long as we don't give up." Suddenly, a rockslide thundered down the mountainside. Myra screamed, pushing Clara and the boy out of the way. George barely leapt aside as rocks shattered the path where he had been standing. "Keep moving," Myra yelled over the wind. They scrambled forward, slipping on wet stones, fighting the rain and wind. Behind them, the path collapsed further, cutting off any chance of retreat. At last they reached the top of the ridge. The storm howled around them, lightning striking far below in the valley. And there, between the clouds, they saw it, a faint glimmer of light, the walls of destiny. Clara gasped, rain streaming down her face. We made it." George pulled her close, holding her in the storm. "This is just the beginning, but we survive, together." For the first time in weeks, hope shone brighter than fear. Even as the storm raged, the future and their love felt real again. The gates of destiny rose before them like a beacon in the storm, tall steel walls, crowned with watchtowers and barbed wire. Fires burned along the perimeter, casting golden light that cut through the gray rain. Myra signaled for silence. "Stay low. We don't know who's watching. Not everyone welcomes strangers." George led Clara and the boy to a side entrance, a small service gate partially hidden by overgrown vines. The rain soaked through their clothes, but George didn't notice. He was focused, heart pounding with anticipation. A guard appeared, young, tense, rifle ready. Myra stepped forward. "We're survivors. We have children. We fought our way here. We seek refuge." The guard's eyes flicked over them, assessing every movement. Finally, he nodded and opened the gate. "Move quickly. Watch your step." They slipped inside, the warm glow of torches and the smell of cooked food hitting them like a wave. Families huddled around fires, children playing with handmade toys, guards patrolling the walls. Life persisted here, against all odds. George exhaled, turning to Clara. "We're safe for now." She smiled through her tears, pulling him close. "I knew we'd make it, as long as we're together." The boy looked up at George, eyes wide. Do we live here now?" "Yes," George said softly. "We survived and now we live." Myra glanced toward the main gate, expression unreadable. "It's not perfect, nothing ever is, but you'll have shelter, food, and time to heal. That's more than most get." George looked around, feeling a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. The world outside was still broken, but here, within the walls of destiny, they had a chance to start over. He held Clara's hand, the boy by her side. For the first time in weeks he felt the weight of fear lift, replaced by something stronger: hope, love, and the promise of tomorrow. Days passed, and Destiny became their new home. George, Clara, Myra, and the boy settled into routines, helping fortify the walls, scavenging supplies, and learning the rhythms of life in a place built on survival and trust. But even in this sanctuary, the past lingered. Every shadow reminded George of Liam. Every scream of the infected outside the walls echoed in his memory. Some nights, he woke drenched in sweat, gripping Clara's hand. One evening, as the sun set in deep autumn hues, George and Clara walked along the fortified walls. "Do you ever think about everything we lost?" Clara asked softly. "Every day," George admitted. "But I can't let it stop me. We survived, that counts for something." A gentle breeze carried the scent of burning leaves from the nearby forests, a reminder of the world they had escaped. George took Clara's hand, holding it tightly. "We can't change the past," he said, "but we can choose our future, and I choose this, us." The boy ran past them, laughing, chasing a makeshift ball. George smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in weeks. Myra approached, her usual stoicism softened by the golden sunset. "You did well, George, both of you. You kept your people alive." George shook his head. "It wasn't just me. We all survived because we trusted each other, even when trust was hard." As night fell, George and Clara sat under a tree, the boy asleep at their feet. Stars appeared above Destiny's walls, shimmering in the crisp autumn air. The fires of the camp flickered, painting the world in warm light. "We're alive," Clara whispered. "And we're together," George replied. "Nothing else matters." The echoes of the past were still there, the betrayal, the fire, the endless nights of fear. But for the first time, they felt like ghosts behind them. Before them stretched a future they could finally embrace. Love, survival, and hope, all shining brighter than the end of the world itself. Life in Destiny settled into a rhythm, but George knew the world outside hadn't stopped being dangerous. Every day, people trained, repaired, and planned. And every day, the memory of what they had endured reminded them that survival wasn't guaranteed. George and Clara became a quiet anchor for the boy, teaching him how to climb walls, forage safely, and trust in others again. Myra took them under her wing as well, guiding them through the unspoken rules of the camp. One evening, around the campfire, George looked around at the faces of the survivors, scarred, tired, but alive. "We've lost so much," he said softly. "But look at this is what remains: friends, family, hope." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "And love, don't forget that." As the autumn wind rustled the trees, George realized that trust could be rebuilt, slowly, cautiously, but it could. Even after betrayal, even after heartbreak, people could find each other again. Myra approached, handing George a mug of steaming tea. "You're doing well," she said, her tone unusually gentle. "Better than most in your shoes." George took the cup, exhaling in relief. I don't want to lose anyone else. Not ever." Clara squeezed his hand. "You won't, not here." The fire crackled between them, the stars above like distant witnesses to their survival. The world outside might still be dangerous, but within Destiny, the bonds they formed were unbreakable. And for the first time in months, George allowed himself to believe, truly believe, that life could be beautiful again. Peace in Destiny was fragile. One morning, Myra returned from a scouting mission, her face tight with worry. "George, we have a problem. A new horde is moving from the south. Estimates say hundreds, maybe more. They're heading straight for us." George's stomach sank. "How much time?" 2 days, if we're lucky. We need to prepare the walls and evacuate non-combatants." Clara placed a hand on his arm, eyes wide. "We can do this. We survived worse." Myra nodded. Yes, but this will test everyone. The walls might hold, but we need strategy and courage. That night, George walked along the battlements, gazing at the dark forests beyond the camp. The stars were hidden by clouds, and the world felt heavy with anticipation. "We've made it this far," he whispered to Clara. "We can survive one more storm." Clara rested her head against his chest. "And we'll do it together." As the first rain of the new storm began to fall, George realized something. The apocalypse could destroy cities, betray friends, and steal lives, but it couldn't break what truly mattered. Love, loyalty, and hope, they remained, stronger than any threat. Below them, the camp buzzed with preparation. Survivors armed themselves, reinforced gates, and lit watchfires. George and Myra moved silently, planning strategies, coordinating defenses, hearts pounding with urgency. And somewhere in the dark, beyond the walls, the horde stirred, thousands of shadows waiting for the moment to strike. George tightened his grip on his weapon, glancing at Clara. "We fight and we survive, together." The storm raged, lightning splitting the sky, echoing the battle to come. The first screams shattered the early morning fog. Hundreds of the infected surged against Destiny's walls, their moans like a living storm. George, Clara, Myra, and the other defenders fought with everything they had. Arrows flew, rifles cracked, and makeshift barricades splintered under the relentless force. Sparks from flaming torches illuminated the chaos, painting the battlefield in shades of fire and blood. George swung his crowbar at a leaping infected, knocking it backward into a pile of debris. Clara fired a small handgun, each shot echoing in the early dawn. The boy huddled behind Myra, clutching a wooden bat she had given him. "You're stronger than you think," she whispered. Hours passed like minutes. Every corner of Destiny was tested, gates rattled, fires burned, and some sections were overrun briefly, forcing desperate retreats. Through it all, George never let go of Clara's hand. "We survived together," he shouted over the roar. She nodded fiercely, "Always." By late afternoon, the tide began to turn. Myra coordinated the defenders, using fire, traps, and clever maneuvers to push the horde back. George noticed the exhaustion in everyone, cuts, bruises, sweat streaking through rain-soaked faces, but no one faltered. Finally, with a coordinated push, Destiny's defenders reclaimed the outer walls. The horde broke apart, retreating into the forests, leaving behind the fallen and the echoes of chaos. George sank to his knees, gasping for breath, holding Clara close. "We made it," he whispered. Clara kissed his forehead, tears mixing with sweat and rain. "We always do, George, as long as we're together." Myra approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't just survive, George. You led, you gave people hope." The sun broke through the clouds, golden light spilling over Destiny. The camp was battered but alive, and for the first time in weeks, George truly felt that the nightmare had an end. The morning after the siege was quiet, almost serene. Smoke drifted lazily from the fires, mingling with the golden light of dawn. Survivors moved carefully, tending to the wounded, repairing broken walls, and burying the fallen. George walked with Clara through the camp, hands entwined. "We survived everything," Clara whispered, her voice soft with awe. "And we'll survive whatever comes next," George replied, squeezing her hand. The boy ran ahead, laughing for the first time in weeks. His smile, bright and unburdened, felt like sunlight breaking through the darkness. Myra approached, carrying a small crate of supplies. "Destiny isn't perfect," she said, glancing at the battered camp. "But it's a beginning, a place to rebuild, to heal." George nodded, looking around at the faces of the survivors, tired, scarred, but alive. "We lost a lot," he admitted, "but we have each other, that's what matters." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "And we'll make sure the world remembers what it means to fight for hope." The wind whispered through the autumn trees, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and burning leaves. For the first time since the world fell apart, George allowed himself to imagine a future, a real one, filled with love, laughter, and life beyond survival. Destiny wasn't just a place, it was a promise. And they had made it together. Weeks passed, and Destiny transformed from a battered survivor camp into a thriving community. The walls still bore scars of the siege, but laughter and life now filled the streets. Children ran freely, the smell of cooking fires mixed with the crisp autumn air, and survivors rebuilt homes with careful hands and hopeful hearts. George and Clara had their own small cabin near the center of the camp. The boy, now calling them family, painted the walls with bright colors and ran barefoot through the gardens. One afternoon, under the golden canopy of autumn leaves, George held Clara's hand as they walked along a quiet path. "We've seen the worst of the world," he said softly, "but somehow we're here, alive together and stronger." Clara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "And nothing can take that away from us." Myra passed by, nodding at them with a rare, gentle smile. "You did more than survive. You gave people a reason to hope again." George looked around, children playing, neighbors sharing stories, the mountains glowing in the evening sun, and felt a peace he hadn't known since the first day the world ended. He pulled Clara close. "We've earned this," he whispered. "Our story isn't over, it's just beginning." As the autumn light bathed Destiny in shades of amber and gold, George, Clara, and the boy watched the sun set together, hearts full. The apocalypse had tried to break them. Betrayal had tried to tear them apart. But love, courage, and hope had won. And in that quiet, golden moment, they knew one thing for certain. No matter what came next, they would face it together forever.